Imeall an Ucht. Dálan uair bhruach na sionine. Tá spántas festas rinke sa Firkin Crane. An fila John Montague among chóra le Michael Cronin, agus ceol leis an Chatham Saxophone Quartet. Doscail Dálan luan bhruach na sionine in lár bhaile a luan díoch ribh an nolig, Dálan fíorálinn fad ribh géarhála se lár na tíre. Thugar dúirs gur sinnéad ní bhainnig cuairtear an maile lena éiscintí hain agus leir sí le muintear na háite faoin athrú suntasach tá tacar áth luin.
Miriam Mulrennan, can you explain to me, please, what is under the umbrella of Athlone Art and Heritage?
Sure. Athlone Art and Heritage is a company set up by Athlone Town Council, and I suppose I describe the organisation as having custodianship of a number of facilities around the town. These include the Lewin Gallery, where we are now, Athlone Castle across the road, and Abbey Road Artist Studios just across the river.
Can you tell me a little bit about the cultural vacuum that existed in Athlone before Lewin opened?
I suppose there's a number of aspects to that. First of all, with the castle's closure, there was a real kind of sense of loss, I think, in the community that their castle wasn't open, that it wasn't there for tourism. So from that aspect, I suppose the heritage side, that was very heartfelt among the community, among the Athlonians. As far as the visual arts go, there quite simply wasn't a dedicated visual arts space in the Midlands. It is no more complicated than that. So I think we addressed a huge gap there.
Tá borra faoin náid, tá fuinneamh núteach isteach an náid. Feadh tréimh sem mór cheaptaína gur áite álóna in neachcha tú riad na bhí tú galas gaiile go bla clia.
Fear, aontainn leat.
Aontainn tú leman sin. Ach, inis á díide nach féad a breanthú gur áite le stoppa an. Gáil isteach agus ámach chathe sa Danlan, sa Ghuisteán agus nó siúlatíomh na hán, toras a bheidir an nán, tá na rudí seo lugar fáil in seo níos.
Tá féidirchtaí cínta leis an Danlan nua seo, aber lum bhfuil tú féin buinteach nó ceangailta leis an Danlan ó thaobh an oideachas nua tá sé chun sprága b'éidir ar muintear na háite.
Ó thaobh an oideacha sí agus ó thaobh alín nó mhocail nó alín a bhéal be muid ceangailta leis tásúlam. Feicim go mé muid an imeachtaí a bhróp an cín ó thaobh b'éidir imeachtaí filiochtaí agus an sin is áismhóra de alíntóirí áitiúla cébí áite méid sead mas péintearí nó dealmhóirí nó hébe cead is alín a bheits an. A cinnte dearafa is spre go mór a bheits an don alín áitiúlann seo sin gan dáta be.
The medium that I work in most is enamelling, which is fusing enamel, which is powdered glass, onto metal in a hot kiln. Abbey Road Studios is a dedicated area for artists to produce work, and now that it's connected with the gallery, artists can display their work, and local artists at that. It's important to me and it's important to artists that are in the studio because it's connecting with the community as well and getting people involved. Even being in the studio, it's great to be around talented people and be around people with similar interests. And it kind of pushes you to do a bit more when you see the competition, and it's great for artists to work locally and that they won't have to go further afield.
If you're inclined to prove myself, if you're inclined to whisper grass shell.
The location here on the river is fantastic, and we're so blessed, but the building has always been here, and the townspeople of Athlone have very strong association to this building, whether when John McCormack performed here, whether when it was first built by the woolen mills, it was a cinema, it was a town hall. It's had a really colourful past, so we're delighted to be the next chapter in that, and it's almost, it feels appropriate that that's how it's evolved. This part of the building where we're in now is the new part, obviously, and there was great debate and discussion, necessarily so, about how this new part would marry with the old. But now the reaction as people come in is fantastic. They love to come in here. We have what we call lolling Fridays, where people just come and sit in this space and admire the river. A local collective actually making space did this piece, this installation piece, under the theme of red carpet for the opening. It's getting a little tired now, but we're loath to take it down because they used wool as a kind of a nod, if you like, to the woolen mills who originally built the building. We sort of feel like we're part of the story of the building. People just come in every day and tell us stories, and they do the same in the castle. They were like, oh, I remember my dad, and he knew someone who lived in the barracks building. So we have huge respect for that felt sense of ownership and relationship to the building, and it was really important. Even in putting together the first show, we kept coming back to that. We kept coming back to the building and what it meant to the town.
And it really is in a postcard setting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new view. That's the other thing these new projects have brought to the town. Again, in the castle and here, there are new ways of seeing the town that weren't previously here. There's new ways of seeing St. Peter's and Paul's that weren't previously here. And we'll expand upon that. We'll get the chance to have collaborations. We're very friendly with our neighbours in St. Peter's and Paul's. There's Harry Clark windows in there. I hope to do some workshops because we have so much glass here. We could have great fun with school programmes and educational initiatives.
So you'll be absolutely inspiring the next generation of visual artists from Athlone.
The Luan Gallery will be, absolutely. We hope to.
Tá muid ag cnú leis.
Tá den seo a gcathair churcaí ag glár an na damsa an Firkin Crane le comóra a dhéanamh ar Híal agus ar híthir Joan Denise Moriarty, ban ar haing clú agus umrá ar Ballet in Éireann.
So Sinead, tell me a little bit about the background of the exhibition and your own background as a dancer.
Well, I trained with Miss Moriarty from a very young age. I started in her school when I was 8, and then I progressed into teaching in her school. And I taught in her school right up until her death and continued afterwards, and left her school then in 2009 and set up my own school here in the Firkin Crane. And then just in the year gone by, 2012, we celebrated the centenary of her birth. So one of the things that we said would be a good idea would be to have an exhibition highlighting all the major achievements of her life. We went back over all the artefacts that we have belonging to her, costumes that were worn by her in her ballet companies, and the Firkin Crane seemed to be the ideal place for us to actually show all of these off.
And would she have affected you as a dancer?
Oh yes, immensely, in so many ways. I suppose as a person more so than a dancer. I suppose the struggles way back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s are well highlighted, and the fact that I suppose she made ballet an Irish phenomenon because it didn't have a history of it really in the country. Discipline was such a huge thing when I was a child, and I think I've learned all of that from her. And I like, in some way, that I'm actually passing on her discipline, her love of dance, her love of music, her love of art onto my own students in my own school.
And would her Irishness have come across in her teaching?
Very much so, and in her choreography as well. She tried to collaborate the Irish dance steps, traditional Irish dance steps, with the classical form.
That's very rare.
And I think it's her greatest achievement, to be honest, I really do. She choreographed many Irish ballets to music by Sean O'Riordan, the Chieftains, and there was ballets called Devil to Pay, Lou of the Golden Arm, and of course her very famous Playboy of the Western World, which travelled to New York, London, France, and Dublin for the Dublin Theatre Festival, and also here in Cork.
An rud a suntaí fin taisbánta seo, ná go bhfuil muid an ná breanú ar chur smaointeoireachta Miss Moriarty ó na pictiúí na líneachtaí ó bhunús, go dtí na feistis féin agus na scéalta, an ceol, na tradiisiún chuidir de chéile. Ó híomh na feististe is brálams an gúna seo margheall ar cé chuir simplí tá sé. Ní rud níos fearr ach a bheith breanúir seo agus nuair nach bhfuil aon rud eile an ach a damsa hain, agus nach bhfuil rud ar bit le tú breanúir aon rud, tú breanúir ar na cosa agus tú breanúir ar rach na damseoirí agus ar na lábhas choilead mar sin. Agus feictear dom nuair chatar rud mar seo is rud clascach é agus cum rá bhrálam hain me héine cáil gan mar sin. Os mo chórann seo tá ballet bar a bhíoch ag Joan Denise Moriarty agus í a chur seonaí agus i múna rang níos na stúdióna a bhí aici. Agus ionintach an rud é an air staire atá an na ruúin atá fácaí air agus tétá hain ar damseoirí agus iad i cleachta leis. Would Miss Moriarty work closely with the designers on these dresses? Would she have much of an input on the final product in the shows?
Oh, very much so. I think all her life there was a collaboration between set designers, composers, musicians, costume designers, costume seamstresses.
So she also played the war pipes as well. Would music have been a big thing in the productions?
Oh yes, absolutely. She had, I suppose it was an unusual hobby that an Irish lady would play the Irish war pipes. But that actually, that talent that she had started her collaboration with the late Professor Fleischmann, because he had composed a piece called Clare's Dragoons, which needed an Irish war piper to play. And he asked her, would she play the war pipes? And she said, yes, if you will provide me music and an orchestra for my companies.
Yeah.
So she played the war pipes for Clare's Dragoons in the Cork City Hall. And then 2 years later, in 1947, for the first ballet week in Cork, Professor Fleischmann and his orchestra played. So in 1945, I suppose, began a collaboration that lasted until their deaths in 1992.
Breanúir animachtaí móra ar nó Giselle agus Swan Lake is gné an idirnáisiúnta é sin ar bhealach ach I breanúir ggóthaigh éireannach braham cinál broúil ar bhealach. Saolaí bheith an airad obair sin a chur isteach I do híal agus a bheith an airad éificht bheith agat ar glúin eile agus stíl omláin a chur chun cín an tír. Ní bheith bailé an air an marachaí.
Fáilte Harnáis. Tá fila John Montague ar chuine is na daoine is tábhachtaí a saoil litreacht in na hÉireann. Tá breis lechiad blian ann ó d'ailsigh sé chéad chunúsach, agus beidh chéad fila a tugad chun an áir olah filíochta na hÉireann dó. Is a báras na Franca tá sé lunathe le roinnt blianta nuas, ach tá ceanga láidir go le hÉireann na gánaí. Bhí sé Somália le déanaíon ar seolach an cairnín The Wild Dog Rose, cairnín inaíonn sé chud dáanta airis le ceola Paddy Maloney agus na Chieftains. Agus leir sé lenar dúirscóir Michael Cronin faoin saoil ilghinéach tá caiteige.
John Montague, you've been referred to by some people as Ireland's post-laureate, and of course you were the first Ireland professor of poetry, but yet you were born in Brooklyn. You came to Ireland at a fairly early age. Do you feel at some level that you're kind of both a kind of an insider and an outsider in the society that you grew up in?
Well, I sometimes think I'm a complete fraud, which helps to keep me in due modesty. Inside, outside, At the age of 4, I found myself on a farm in County Tyrone. In Brooklyn, as a child, I'd become accustomed to the cinema and to that kind of mythology. And then I found myself in a country post office with all these strange old people coming down from the hills on pension day. And there really was an early introduction into older Ireland. And then the layers of County Tyrone, which, as you know, was the only area of Ireland which actually fought the English under the O'Neills. The kind of layers which were hidden in there, that all seemed kind of mythical and replaced in my head. Well, it joined in with what I'd seen of the early cinema, and also with the books I was reading, that I began to read.
You talked there about the sort of hidden layers in Tyrone, in the history of the area. Is there a sense that you were trying in the rough fields to give voice or bear witness to those layers of experience that had gone underground for a long time?
Oh, I think we fear that our lives will pass into oblivion, and there'll be nothing left for future generations. So we have to save something. And I think poetry is kind of alms for oblivion, in a way. A poem called A Grafted Tongue. Dumb, bloodied, the severed head now chokes to speak another tongue. As in a long suppressed dream, some stuttering garbled ordeal of my own. An Irish child weeps at school, repeating its English. After each mistake, the schoolmaster gouges another mark on the tally stick hung about its neck, like a bell on a cow, a hobble on a straying goat.
One of the poems that's in the rough field, which is probably one of the most quoted poems when people talk about the shift from Irish to English, is A Grafted Tongue.
Well, a lovely story about that. I was asked to go to the island of Okinawa. And I was asked to go because they adored the poem. And it seems the Japanese had done that to them. The Okinawans had their own language and had been taken away. And there was a woman there who was in government, and she'd read this poem, and she paid for us to go all the way to Okinawa, which is 6,000 miles, in order to read that poem. To grow a second tongue, as harsh a humiliation as twice to be born. Decades later, that child's grandchild's speech stumbles over lost syllables of an old order.
One of the things I haven't mentioned so far is the presence of art, of painting. And we've got a poem like Wind Harp, which is dedicated to Patrick Collins. Is paintings, the act of painting, is that something that's important for you to think about in writing your poems or creating your own sets of images?
Well, I've usually liked painters. I'm intrigued, as one often is, by the way they work. What kind of relish that people have in doing something. In the music, in using paint, in striking chords on the piano, or any other instrument. All that is so, whereas the writer at his desk scratching his head, hoping for the good word to come, one is envious of the physicality of music and painting and all that.
Shifting, I suppose, focus slightly, the French government has given you one of its highest honours, the Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. You've translated French poets like Yvick. What role has France played for you? Is it just a country that's given you another perspective on your work, on experience?
I didn't learn French at school because we didn't have French teachers. But I was aware of the great drama of the war. I did have this feeling about French, an intense feeling. But a friend from Derry said he was going to cycle through France, and I felt a pang and said, I'll come with you, I must come with you. So in the year 1948, I think it may be earlier even, that we set off for France on our bicycles. And I was extremely moved by a good deal that I saw, especially the battlefields of northern France, to see so many graves. That seemed to mean something intensely to me. I learned a lot of French prose because I was hoping to be a good writer of prose. But the poetry often tended to take me over. What can you do to a poem that's struggling to come through you?
Sa DIT ráid Chatham bhleá clia a tháinig ceathair ceoltóirí cumasacha le chéile, agus is féidir lena bheith heasúla neart a chlasótha mbliana mar bhuaiteoirí an gradam Young Nationwide a Agrian Music Network. Hain siad piasa ceol le Michael Nyman go speisialta dúin le gard, seo hanis siad an Chatham Saxophone Quartet le mír ó Songs for Tony. Iva.